guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, along here with Sophia, who may be a special guest star for however long she wants to sit with me, and this is going to be my December wrap-up. I can't believe how quickly 2018 has gone past. It's just slightly astonishing, staggering. I can't believe that 2018 is already over. This year has been so busy, so busy. Things have been wild, haven't they? And we have done so much reading together and there have been so many amazing books read, so many good friends met. It's just been an excellent year. I'm going to try not to get too mushy and sentimental here, but oh well. So in the month of December, I managed to read 10 books, which is incredibly exciting because, as I've said over the past couple of months, I've been feeling like I've been in a little bit of a reading slump, or at least sort of getting on the verge of a reading slump, which is never a happy time, especially if you do things like read lots of books for the internet. Never quite teetered over into a full reading slump, but I definitely slowed down a lot. I didn't really have much to worry about. I managed to read 118 books this year, and 10 of those were in the month of December. It's been kind of a crazy year up and down with reading, but I did manage to read some of my favorite books of 2018 in the month of December, and I am going to be starting off on an excellent foot in January for next year. So I read, as I said, 10 books. 2 of them were middle grade, and let's see, 3 of them were young adult and the rest were adult books. 2 books that I read were audiobooks as well. The very first book that I read in the month of December was Empress of All Seasons, and this is by Emiko Jean. So I was very, very excited to get a copy of this book in the post from Galance, and I devoured it. This was kind of the book that I feel sort of kicked me out of that reading slump. I had a few things that I powered through despite sort of being in this weird place for reading, but this is the book that really got me back on the right track, and I'm very, very happy that I read this. Empress of All Seasons follows a character named Mari, and Mari lives in a country in which any girl in the entire country can come to the capital to compete in a sort of Hunger Games-esque competition to win the hand of the prince and become empress. Mari has been training for this her whole life. However, she has a little bit of a secret. She is a yokai, which is basically a demon that looks like a human. Yokai are not allowed to compete in this competition, and she has to keep her identity a secret. So there's other characters that we follow. We follow the prince, and we follow another character named Akira, who is half yokai and half human. But Mari is really the star of the show here, and she's such an incredibly great character. I really, really loved her, and reading about these trials that she has to go through. The competition itself actually doesn't take up as much of the book as you would think it does, which was a little bit disappointing because it just sounded so incredibly cool. So basically you have these 4 rooms within the palace, 1 for each season, hence the name of the book, and you basically have to battle it out and survive and be one of the last people standing and sort of acquire these scrolls. The scroll will get you to the next room, and I loved everything that happened in those rooms. I wish we had gotten a little bit more because it was so incredibly cool. I love the world building in this book, just kind of overall, even outside of the competition. It's just so beautifully done, and she obviously has a great skill for creating these cultures, not just for the humans and for the world that they live in, but also for the yokai themselves, because there's so many different kinds, and that was basically one of my favorite parts of this book, was learning all about the yokai. I just thought that it was so beautifully done and really, really well described without being kind of info dumpy. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I think my only gripe with it is that it ends in an epilogue very suddenly. I feel like if we had an extra 50 pages at the end of the book that actually describes the events of the epilogue, it would have been fantastic. This book would have been so good, but I feel like we were robbed a little bit of some of what could have been the best parts of the book. Another book that I read in the month of December was Dumplin by Julie Murphy. So I watched the Netflix series or Netflix movie of this and like loved it. It was so incredibly fun. It's so much that I just love, and it was so joyful, and I loved the film. So I decided to pick up the book, and I have to say I didn't love the book as much as I loved the film. I feel like the film really took the best parts of the book and really drew upon them and extended them, and I feel like the book had some things in it that I didn't love as much. Dumplin is about a girl named Willadine Dixon, and she is a plus-size girl living in Texas, and her mother is sort of the local celebrity. She runs the local beauty pageant. And so after sort of losing her confidence when she gets in this kind of complicated relationship with this boy that she likes, she decides that she is going to enter into the pageant and kind of smash these beauty standards, which, like, I love, and it was so incredibly good. The pageant didn't really factor into this book as much as I had hoped it would. I feel like it took up much more time during the film, which I really, really loved. And I feel like in the book you get a lot more cattiness between Willadine and some of the other beauty pageant contestants, but that's less of a thing in the film, and that's something I loved in the movie so much, is that these girls just aren't being bitchy and horrible to each other based on their appearance, but you do get that in this book, which I totally understand, and it never really kind of gets resolved in a funny way. If we want to talk about it, then let me know, because I don't want to spoil this for anyone. But I felt like there was a lot to love here, but the film was just... The film was so good. The one thing that I do think this book did a little bit better than the movie was her relationship with Beau, who's this boy. In the film, he's basically like a 30-plus-year-old looking man who hangs out outside the dumpster at work. It's like the only place that they ever see each other. They have a much more fleshed out relationship in this book, so if that's something that bothered you in the film, you should read the book instead. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It's a really nice, fun read, and I think it has some amazing things to say, particularly for teenage girls, but I feel like the film did the things that I loved a little bit better. Another book that I was looking forward to in the month of December is one of my most highly anticipated books of 2018. It's an adult fantasy book, and I had some mixed feelings on it. This is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. Empire of Sand follows a girl named Mare, and Mare is the daughter of the local governor. However, she is his illegitimate daughter, so she's in this kind of funny place of having all this privilege and wealth. However, she doesn't have the respect of the people around her because she is illegitimate. Mare's mother was a member of the Empress tribe, who are a kind of nomadic people who practice these wonderful rituals and magic, and this is very, very frowned upon because these people are hunted down in the Empire. One day she is caught performing one of these rituals and attracts the wrong kind of attention, so she is whisked away in an arranged marriage to a man she's never met, and her power is kind of harnessed for a cause that she does not agree with. There's so much to love about Empire of Sand. So much of this is beautiful and perfect. I loved it. The world is based on Indian mythology, and it's just so beautifully done. The world building is incredible. The cultures are wonderful. All of the dance and rituals that go with the religion are beautiful. The whole concept of Dreamfire is amazing, and I loved all of that so much. I also really loved our characters, particularly Mare. Like, she's amazing. She is one of my favorite female characters in fantasy at the moment. She's always very strong and very capable. However, she grows as a character, and her compassion is so incredibly touching, and it never gets kind of preachy at all, and I really love that. This book also has an amazing slow burn romance. If you like slow burn romances and you like marriages of convenience, like, this is definitely the book for you. So I'm singing all of these praises, so what kind of went wrong for me here? This book is so dense. It is so dense, and it's quite slow as well, and as much as I loved reading lots of parts of it, overall, particularly in the middle, I felt like it could have used maybe a little bit more editing. There were parts of it that were incredibly repetitive. This book took me about a month to read, which is not great because I'm the kind of person who reads about 2 books a week. I really struggled with this one, and I love so much of it, but I feel like the writing was just a little bit too dense and a little too repetitive. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it's an incredible story. It's got amazing characters. Everything is wonderful and beautiful and perfect, except for the writing. I am very much looking forward to the next book, which is Realm of Ash. It's going to be amazing, and I'm really interested to see if the writing changes at all. Next, we have 2 of my favorite reads of the year, and they are both children's books. So the very first one is The Way Past Winter, and this is by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. So she is the author of a book called The Girl of Ink and Stars, which I absolutely loved last year. It was one of my favorite books of 2017, and I was very excited to get my hands on this book because this kind of has a little bit of a Bear and the Nightingale vibe, which is very exciting. This book follows a character named Mila, and Mila lives in a kind of land that's plagued by an eternal winter. It's been winter for years and years and years. Spring has never returned, and she lives with her 2 sisters and her brother in a cabin in the woods because her mother has passed away and her father just up and left one day. One night strangers come through town and talk to her brother, and the next day he and all the other boys in their village disappear. They're just gone forever. So everyone assumes that they went off to kind of seek their fortune or have adventures, and Mila's not convinced. She decides she's gonna go find her brother and all the boys in the village. I love this book so much. It's just such a perfect book for kind of a cold night. You can power through it in a single evening. It's a beautiful book. It has like a gold ribbon. Like, all of her books have these lovely sort of illustrations on the pages, and it's just such a wonderfully atmospheric book. I could not recommend this more highly for the winter time. Something that she does really well in this book is she captures the sort of danger and harshness of winter, but also the comfort that it can bring. I don't want to give too much away, but I do really recommend this book if you have read some of her books, but also if you enjoy sort of atmospheric wintry reads. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. Next middle grade book that I read was Pages & Co., and this is by Anna James. So this is kind of the perfect book for any sort of like childhood nostalgia. If you were a reader as a child, I would so highly recommend just pick this up. Just do it. Pages & Co. follows a girl named Matilda, or Tilly, and she lives in a bookshop called Pages & Co. with her grandparents. Her mother has disappeared when Tilly was a baby, and she's never known her father, and she lives this kind of very fine existence, and then one day she discovers that she is a book wanderer. She can wander into her favorite books, she can pull characters out of those books and become friends with them, and she has to kind of go through the process of becoming a book wanderer, learning the rules about book wandering, but also learning what it might have to do with her mother's disappearance. She becomes best friends with Anne from Anne of Green Gables and Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and it's just like, it's so perfect. This is truly a book for book lovers. I cannot recommend this more highly, especially if you loved these kinds of classics when you were children. It's so funny and sharply written, and it's definitely one of those books that I think adults and children alike can enjoy. It's just beautifully done. I really loved it. I feel like this kind of story is nothing really new, sort of you being able to fall into your favorite book or wander into your favorite book or whatever, but she does an incredibly good job of making this feel so incredibly fresh and unique and wonderful, and like, can't get enough. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm actually a little bit sad that I already filmed my Best Books of 2018 video, because this definitely is on the list, so just mentally add that one. The next book that I read is actually borrowed from one of my lovely friends. This is The Library of Fates, and this is by Aditi Khurana. I had heard about this book sort of here and there over 2017 when it came out, and I remember this very pink cover, but I didn't hear much about it, so I was really interested when I saw this on my friend Judith's shelf, and I borrowed it from her, and I really liked it. I feel like it had the potential to be a lot more though. This book follows a girl named Amrita, and she is the princess of Shalingar. However, one day a man named Sikander, who's kind of coming in and conquering nations, comes into her home and it sort of demands her hand in marriage. Through a series of events, she ends up fleeing the palace with an oracle named Thala, and she has to find the Library of Fates in order to change the events of the past. So this started out really cool. This actually has one of my favorite beginnings of a fantasy book just ever. Like, the opening chapters are absolutely amazing and they're so incredibly gripping, and I really liked the ending as well. But I feel like in the middle this book kind of lost its way a little bit. I feel like it couldn't decide if it was a book about sort of political intrigue, or if it was a book about mythology, or if it was sort of a fable that had sort of a moral. And a book can be any kind of combination of these, but I feel like it didn't necessarily combine all these different themes very well. I did, however, really enjoy her world building. This is another book that's based on Indian mythology, and the way that she sort of brought that to life, and she drew in different stories from mythology was really fantastic. I loved reading all of these sort of descriptions of the architecture and the descriptions of the food and the clothing and everything, but also all of these different tales that had been drawn in. Overall, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it for sure. It's definitely a really good kind of quick-paced read. I feel like it could have been a fantastic book though. It just maybe lost its way a little. The last book that I read in the month of December was Transcription by Kate Atkinson. So now I don't have it here with me because I actually left it at home for my mom to read because she's a big fan of Kate Atkinson's, but this was my very first book by her. Transcription was a really, really interesting read for a number of reasons. It follows a character named Juliet at 3 different stages of her life. So the book opens in 1980 when she is an older woman, and it mostly takes place in the 1940s and the 1950s in London. So during the war in the 1940s, she was recruited by MI5 to become basically a transcriber for these recorded conversations by one of their double agents with Nazi sympathizers in London. And in the 1950s, she's working at the BBC, but people from her past keep cropping up and she doesn't really know what's going on. I thought that the storytelling in this book was really interesting because rather than sort of flashing between time periods between chapters, you actually have these big chunks of the book, say 150 pages or so, dedicated to one time period, then you switch to another, and then you switch back, which was a little bit strange, and it was a little bit of an adjustment because you get really invested and then it would change. But I can't really think of a better way for her to have told this story because there's so much background information that's needed. I loved all of the bits that took place during the war especially. I thought that the parts that took place in the 1950s maybe weren't as interesting in the beginning and took a little while for me to get into. However, once you start to uncover that backstory, it becomes really, really good. Juliet's a really interesting character because she's a bit strange in a way. It might just be because she's not what you expect from sort of the narrative that we get from women at this time. And I feel like more and more stories of these sort of courageous women and these sort of women who broke the mold of what femininity was at the time sort of are coming out now. We're learning a lot more about women and women's roles in the war, and this is a really, really interesting contribution to that. I really like seeing the way that she changes between the 1940s and the 1950s and how her life experience has impacted her. That was a really, really fascinating part of the story for me. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. Hello, so I am editing this video right now and I realized that because I'm using this new camera, I got a new camera. You might be able to tell there's a slight difference in quality from my videos from last year to this year. And I'm still kind of figuring out how to work it, and it turns out that it deleted 2 of the books that I talked about kind of toward the end. So yeah, I'm just gonna go over those really quickly now because I said that I read like 9 or 10 or something, and it would obviously be kind of short. So I read 2 audiobooks in the month of December. The first one was The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. I loved Cosmos by Carl Sagan, so I thought that I would pick this one up. I also listened to the audiobook for that. And while I loved Cosmos and I really liked The Pale Blue Dot, I think that Cosmos was my preference, as you can probably tell. The Pale Blue Dot talks about sort of the solar system and each planet in the solar system, but it also goes into things like terraforming and space exploration and everything, which is really interesting, but for whatever reason just didn't grab me in the same way that Cosmos did. But what's really cool about the Pale Blue Dot audiobook is that before Carl Sagan died, he actually recorded some of the audiobook. Some of those tapes degraded, but there are a couple of chapters that are actually narrated by him, and having that experience of him reading his own words is really, really cool and really awesome. I really loved that a lot. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it, but I think I liked Cosmos better just in terms of what he covered. The other audiobook that I listened to was Big Little Lies, Little Big Lies, I think it's Big Little Lies, by Leanne Moriarty. So this was turned into a TV show, I think with Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman from HBO, I think, last year. And I haven't seen that yet, but I've been wanting to read the book and watch it. So I read the book first because I got it on discount from the Audible Black Friday sale, and I really enjoyed it. It is, I think there's a Goodreads reviewer that put it the best. They said that it is the funniest book about domestic violence and murder that they have ever read, which I think about covers it. So Big Little Lies follows 3 women who all become friends through circumstance, and they are all mothers of children for this kindergarten class. And we know that at some point, one of the parents is going to be murdered. We just don't know who or how or what happens or anything. And so we get kind of, it all flashes back and then it moves forward in time until you get to the actual event where this parent was killed. And it is pretty dark, but it is so incredibly funny. It's just like, if you've ever been to a school, a ridiculous school, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a private school or anything. I went to a public school, and I feel like this
reflected so much on the absolutely insane parents of like students at the school. It's so funny. If you liked Where'd You Go, Bernadette, I think that this is kind of gonna have similar vibes to that book. It was really, really well done. I really liked all three of the main characters, Celeste and Madeline and Jane. And they're all really interesting, and they have interesting stories, and they're very distinct characters, which I really liked. Just a couple words of warning, if you are going to read this book, it does deal very heavily with domestic violence. One of the parents is in a very, very violent relationship, you find out, and there is on-screen domestic violence. And there's also, I wouldn't call it a rape, because it's one of the things in the book is this is kind of a fuzzy area. There is an on-screen kind of really uncomfortable borderline rape that happens. In my mind it is a rape, but not everyone would agree with me, including characters from the book. So just a heads up, there are a couple of content warnings with this book, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good and well done. The audiobook is pretty good. I liked the narrator, although sometimes I had a little bit of a difficult time differentiating between the three women's voices, but I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I would recommend it, but again, there are some content warnings that go with it. So that's it. Back to the video now.
Is it for my December wrap-up. Those are all the books that I read in the month of December. This year has been a really, really good one for me. I feel like in a lot of ways my reading has been really excellent. I've read some amazing stuff. You may have seen my best books of 2018 video, which is like half an hour long because I read so much amazing stuff this year. I have been able to communicate with so many of you guys both on YouTube and on Twitter, and I'm so incredibly grateful for you guys watching this channel and listen to me ramble about books. I really appreciate it. So in the comments below, let me know how your 2018 was for reading, what you read in December, if you've read any of these books, if they look interesting to you, if they're on your TBR, I would love to hear from you. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.